Before the dragons, the dawn of old Valyria. If you close your eyes for a moment, and let your mind drift far, far back, you can almost hear it. A slow rumble. A heartbeat made of fire. The sound of a world that is no longer here. A world older than the Seven Kingdoms. Older than any maester's book. Older than every whispered legend your grandparents pretended not to believe in. This is old Valyria, the place where the story of House Targaryen truly begins. Valyria did not rise quietly. It did not tiptoe into history. It burst into the world like a volcano waking from a long nap, because, well, that's exactly where it was built. The Valyrian freehold sat in a long ring of volcanoes known as the 14 Flames. Not exactly the kind of neighborhood most people would choose, but Valyrians weren't most people. They liked danger. They liked heat. They liked fire. And they especially liked the creatures that lived inside it. In the early days, Valyria was a quiet peninsula in the eastern continent of Essos. A small place, not yet glowing with magic or power. But then the Valyrians discovered something deep under the earth, something ancient, powerful, and a little bit terrifying. Dragons. Now, most people, when they see a dragon, run. Or faint. Or both. But the Valyrians did something different. They studied them. They learned their language. They learned how to ride them. And once a person is flying on the back of a giant fire-breathing lizard, there's really no going back to normal life. After that, even running a respectable bakery feels boring. With dragons came magic, and with magic came everything else. The Valyrian freehold grew into the mightiest empire in the known world. Their cities shone with marble and strange glowing crystals. They forged weapons that never broke or rusted. Their roads cut across continents, straight as arrows. Their ships crossed oceans like they owned them. And to be fair, they kind of did. But Valyria was never only about armies and dragons and, please don't burn my village, politics. It was also a place of learning. Of art. Of strange experiments that would make today's maesters scream. Valyrians believed knowledge was power, and they collected both the way some people collect fancy cups or limited edition sneakers. And within this mighty empire lived 40 dragon lord houses. Each house commanded its own dragons. Each had its own magic, its own secrets, its own political games. These houses were proud, powerful, and sometimes a little too dramatic for their own good. Among them was one family that did not yet look special. They were respected, yes. But not feared. Not worshipped. Not destined for greatness. Not yet. They were called House Targaryen. The Targaryens were unusual even by Valyrian standards. They were known for their long, pale silver hair that shimmered like moonlight and their strange violet eyes that seemed to look straight through you. Their beauty was famous, but their habits. Well, those were famous too. They valued dreams. Prophecies. Signs. The Targaryens believed their future was written in smoke and fire, and that if you listened closely enough, the flames would speak. You can imagine the other dragon lords rolling their eyes a bit. Oh, there go the Targaryens again, staring into candles. Should we be worried? But the dreams of the Targaryens mattered. They were not the vague, I dreamt my teeth fell out, kind of dreams. They were sharp. Clear. Sometimes frightening. And one of them would change everything. But that is for another chapter. For now, imagine the world they lived in. Valyria was warm, bright, and filled with strange colors. Rivers of lava glowed at night. Towers spiraled into the sky like frozen flames. Dragons circled above the cities, casting huge shadows over the marble streets. You might think this sounds dangerous. And you'd be right. But Valyrians didn't mind. To them, danger was just part of the scenery. The Valyrian people had a strange kind of confidence. When you control dragons, invent magic, and bend mountains to your will, you start thinking very highly of yourself. And sometimes, a little too highly. The Valyrians believed they were chosen. Not by gods, they didn't really care much for gods, but by destiny itself. Their empire grew across Essos like a spreading fire. They conquered cities, built colonies, and pushed their influence further and further. Their magic held the empire together. Their dragons defended it. And in the center of this great storm of power, the Targaryen family watched and waited. Because while the other dragon lords gained strength through pride, the Targaryens gained strength through something quieter, listening. They listened to warnings. To dreams. To the soft whisper of fate brushing against their shoulders. This obsession with dreams shaped the family from the beginning. Every child was raised on stories of visions and omens. Every marriage was arranged to keep their bloodline strong, and yes, that meant weddings inside the family tree. If the Targaryens made a family reunion, it would look suspiciously like a wedding registry. Still, their beliefs set them apart. While other dragon lords chased glory, the Targaryens chased understanding. And perhaps that is why, as the centuries passed, their dreams began to sharpen. But what was Valyria truly like? Imagine a place where even the air felt alive. Magic was thick in the wind. The people glowed with it. The buildings hummed with it. Even their animals were a little odd. If you walked through Valyria, you might see creatures that do not exist anywhere in the world today. Strange hybrids. Winged things. Scaled things. Things that looked at you like they knew something you didn't. And floating above them all were the dragons, the heart of Valyria's strength. They were not pets. Not tools. Not simple beasts. They were partners in power. Some dragons were huge and ancient, scales cracked with age. Others were young and eager, learning the skies. Valyria was the only place in the world where dragons nested in the open, welcomed rather than feared. But even in this land of wonders, shadows gathered. Not the kind you see on the ground, but the kind you feel inside your chest. The Targaryens sensed it before others did. Their dreams whispered warnings. Something was coming. Something vast. Something fiery enough to match Valyria's own flames. A doom. A disaster. A world-ending night. But that, my friend, belongs to the next chapter. For now, our story rests in this ancient place. The home of dragons. The cradle of magic. The birthplace of a family whose fate would shape kingdoms, burn cities, hatch legends, and whisper across centuries. And it all began here, in the heat and glow of old Valyria, where the Targaryens opened their violet eyes to a world built on fire, and listened to it speak. The doom foretold, Daenerys the Dreamer. Before the world burned, before Valyria crumbled, and before the Targaryens became the most dramatic family in Westeros, there was a girl. A quiet girl with silver hair, violet eyes, and a habit of staring into flames like she was reading a book no one else could see. Her name was Daenerys Targaryen. People later called her Daenerys the Dreamer. And honestly, it's a good title. Much better than Daenerys who keeps making everyone nervous, which is probably what her neighbors called her at the time. Daenerys was young when the dreams began. Not the regular kind of dreams, like showing up to school without clothes or falling off a cliff. No, Daenerys saw things that hadn't happened yet. Clear things. Sharp things. Things that made her wake in the night with cold sweat on her face. And one night, she saw the end of everything she knew. She saw Valyria burning. Not just one volcano exploding, not just a fire in the market. She saw the whole continent shatter. She saw mountains melt. She saw cities fall into the sea. She saw dragons screaming in the sky. She saw ash falling like snow. And she saw it all happening in one violent, impossible moment. It was the doom. At first, she didn't want to tell anyone. If you're a teenager with terrifying visions of a fiery apocalypse, you probably keep that to yourself for a while. But the dreams didn't stop. They grew louder, clearer, crueler. Finally, she went to the one person she trusted most, her father, Enar Targaryen. Now, Enar was not the most powerful dragon lord in Valyria. He wasn't the richest, either. House Targaryen was respected but not top of the food chain. In the grand cocktail party of Valyrian politics, they weren't the ones everyone swarmed. They were more like the quiet folks in the corner who showed up mainly because it was polite. So when Daenerys told her father, "Hey Dad, so I saw Valyria explode." Like, all of it. Enar didn't laugh. He listened. And that choice, the simple act of listening to his daughter, would change the fate of the whole world. Enar believed her. Fully, completely, instantly. He didn't ask for details. He didn't argue. He didn't say, "Are you sure it wasn't just the spicy dinner we had last night?" He looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and made a decision that shocked every dragon lord in Valyria. He prepared to leave. Not just a weekend trip. Not a little vacation. Enar Targaryen decided to abandon Valyria, the heart of magic, the seat of power, the place no one ever left. To most dragon lords, the idea was insane. Madness of the highest level. Leave Valyria? Why? It's the greatest empire in the world. But Enar didn't care what they thought. He trusted his daughter more than he trusted centuries of tradition. And so he sold his estates, packed up their belongings, gathered their servants, collected every dragon egg they owned, and even took the older dragons the family had raised for generations. It must have looked a bit strange, this quiet noble house loading up their entire lives while other dragon lords stood there, confused, asking if this was some kind of performance art. But Enar stayed calm. He kept preparing. When everything was ready, the Targaryens left Valyria behind and sailed west across the narrow sea, toward a place called Dragonstone. Now, traveling with dragons is not easy. They don't fit neatly on ships. They don't sit still. And they definitely don't understand the concept of personal space. The journey must have been loud, messy, and filled with moments where someone said, "Please don't set the sails on fire again." Still, the Targaryens reached Dragonstone, a volcanic island shaped like something out of a wild dream. Dark stone towers, sharp cliffs, endless smoke rising from the mountain's mouth. It wasn't as grand as Valyria, but it felt familiar. Warm. Dangerous in the good way. Enar set up his household there, even though almost everyone back in Valyria thought he'd gone crazy. Targaryens on Dragonstone became a quiet rumor. The dragon lords who ran away. Those doom believers. That weird family who listens to dreams. But Enar didn't care. Daenerys didn't care. The family settled into life on their lonely island, waiting, watching, hoping the dreams were wrong. For a few years, nothing happened. And then something did. Something terrible. One day, the sky over Valyria changed. The land split. The mountains roared. And then, in a single, unbelievable moment, the doom of Valyria arrived. There are many stories about what happened. Some say 14 volcanoes erupted at once. Some say the earth cracked open and swallowed entire cities. Some say sorcery backfired and consumed everything. Some say dragons fought in the sky and tore the world apart. But the truth is simple. Valyria died. The proud towers melted. The people burned. Dragons fell like stars from the sky. Magic tore itself apart. And the Freehold, the greatest empire in history, vanished in one day. Imagine the shock. Imagine the silence that followed. Dragonstone must have felt like a graveyard as the news spread across the narrow sea. One by one, ships brought tales of ash falling on faraway shores. Cities covered in smoke. Merchants who had escaped by chance, trembling as they told of red skies and black seas. And somewhere inside the castle, Daenerys, the girl whose dreams had once been called strange, sat quietly. She had seen it all before it happened, yet the real thing must have been worse. Much worse. Her father Enar looked at her then, probably with equal parts heartbreak and pride. She had saved them. All of them. Without her dreams, without his belief, House Targaryen would have burned with the rest. Almost every other Dragonlord family was gone. Lost in fire and ash. All their dragons, too. All their secrets. All their magic. But the Targaryens survived. They became the last Dragonlords in the world. This moment didn't make them powerful right away. It didn't crown them or bless them or hand them an empire. All it did was leave them alone. A single family carrying the last flames of a lost civilization. But from that loneliness, something great would grow. For now, they lived quietly on Dragonstone, a small spark of Valyria in a world that had suddenly become cold. And Daenerys, who once dreamed the end, would now dream a strange future. A future where the Targaryens would rise. Where dragons would fly over a new land. And where fire would shape the fate of kingdoms to come. Dragonstone, the century of waiting. If Dragonstone felt a little lonely on the day the Targaryens arrived, imagine it in the years that followed. Sharp black cliffs, waves crashing like they were trying to pick a fight, and a castle shaped like a dragon's jaw. Not exactly a warm and cozy welcome mat. But for the Targaryens, it was home. A strange home, yes, but still a place where their fire could survive. So they settled in. Built their halls. Carved dragon statues into every wall they could find. And slowly, year after year, they began the long, quiet chapter that history later calls the century of waiting. It sounds dramatic, but honestly, most of it was just life. Dragons flying. People working. A family waiting for the world to change. Though of course, if you're a Targaryen, even normal life is a little wild. Life on Dragonstone. Dragonstone wasn't huge, but it was full of heat. The volcano beneath the island kept the earth warm, the caves smoky, and the dragons happy. Dragons love heat. They don't care for polite dining tables or warm blankets. Give them fire, a wide sky, and the occasional goat, and they're perfectly content. The Targaryens kept their dragons in the caldera and built great stone stables for them. Every day someone had to feed them, clean after them, and make sure they didn't fly off to roast a nearby fishing village by accident. It was a full-time job. Probably several full-time jobs. The kind of work where you don't ask for a raise because the dragon might eat you for sounding disrespectful. Inside the castle, life was more controlled. The Targaryens kept the customs of old Valyria alive. They spoke their old tongue. They kept their bloodline traditions, even the ones that made the Undulls raise their eyebrows. They kept their strange jewelry, their carved masks, their books filled with magic no one else could read. Everything from hairstyles to dragon training rules stayed the same. They did this not because they were stubborn, well, maybe a little, but because keeping Valyria alive inside them felt important. They were the last Dragonlords in the world. If they forgot who they were, then Valyria would truly be gone forever. A quiet yet tense peace. While the Targaryens lived alone on their smoky island, the rest of the world kept moving. And Westeros, the land just across the sea, was a patchwork of kingdoms that didn't get along very well. There was no single ruler. No Iron Throne. No one king to tell everyone to stop fighting. Instead, Westeros was split into 7 kingdoms, each with its own king, own armies, own problems, and own excuses for starting arguments. In the north, the Starks ruled from Winterfell, always cold, always calm, always brooding like they had been waiting for winter their whole lives. In the Vale, the Arryns perched high in their mountain castle, basically saying, if you want to attack us, good luck climbing. The Iron Islands had the Greyjoys, who loved sailing, raiding, and not much else. The Riverlands had the Tullus, and the Stormlands had the Durandons, who always insisted their storms were the biggest and loudest. The Reach was bright and rich under House Gardner, and the Rock was ruled by the Lannisters, who pretended to be humble but failed every time. And finally, there was Dorne, ruled by House Martell, who were like, "No thank you, we do not do winter here." These kingdoms argued. They battled. They raided. They married each other, divorced each other, insulted each other, and sometimes did all of that in the same week. None of them expected a quiet family living on a volcanic rock to one day rule them all. But that quiet family wasn't as mild as they looked. The Targaryens wait, and wait, and wait. After Dany's dream saved them from the doom, the Targaryens watched the world with patient eyes. They listened for omens. They trained their dragons. They built alliances with nearby islands. Sometimes they helped small lords who asked nicely. Sometimes they stayed silent for decades at a time. For 100 years, they didn't conquer anything. Didn't raise armies. Didn't make grand speeches. They just watched. The world thought they were harmless. The world was wrong. Because during this century of waiting, children were born. Young dragon lords were raised. The family remained small, but their will was strong. And at the heart of this quiet, smoky world, a boy was growing up who would change everything. The early life of Aegon. Aegon Targaryen. Yes, that Aegon. The one people later called the Conqueror. The man who forged the Iron Throne. The guy who ruined the long-term job security of 7 different kings. But before all that, Aegon was just a quiet boy living in a castle shaped like a dragon. He was tall early on, serious, calm, and observant. He didn't chatter like other children. Instead, he listened. He watched. He studied everyone around him. People who met him as a child often said he felt older than he was, like he had already seen some part of the future and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. He flew dragons young as well, not recklessly, not for fun, but like he was learning a skill he knew he would need someday. No one told him to be ambitious, but ambition settled in him anyway, like a slow-burning fire. He trained with knights. He studied maps. He asked questions about the 7 kingdoms, even though most people on Dragonstone didn't care much about the mainland. He listened to stories of how the kingdoms fought each other endlessly, and something in those stories bothered him. Maybe he wondered why no one had united the land. Maybe he wondered why so much blood spilled over borders that didn't matter. Or maybe he simply thought dragons should fly over more than one island. His sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, grew up beside him. Visenya was fierce and sharp, a warrior from childhood. Rhaenys was warm and curious, always smiling, always asking questions. They balanced him. They shaped him. Together, the 3 of them shared something no other family in the world had: dragons. Not the weak, dying kind. Real dragons. Living, growing, burning dragons. And dragons, when raised well, do not stay small forever. The first sparks of a bigger future. Aegon never said it out loud, not as a boy. But he looked west often. Stood on the cliffs of Dragonstone and stared toward the horizon. He watched the storms roll across the sea, watched the clouds and waves meet. And maybe, just maybe, he imagined something greater. He imagined a land not divided into 7, but united into 1. A land where his family could build something new. Something lasting. Something stronger than the ancient Valyrian freehold that had burned in a single day. A land where dragons would rule the sky again. And so, as the Targaryens lived their quiet life, training their dragons, guarding their secrets, and waiting for the world to shift, the boy who would become Aegon the Conqueror stood at the edge of Dragonstone, eyes fixed on a future only he could see. The century of waiting was ending. Something was coming. Something that would shake the world. But that, my friend, belongs to the next chapter. Aegon's Conquest, 3 Dragons and a Dream of Empire. When Aegon Targaryen finally decided to stop staring across the sea and actually do something about those 7 noisy kingdoms, the world had no idea what was coming. Westeros had seen wars, sure. It had seen kings fighting kings, lords arguing with lords, and maybe 1 or 2 slightly dramatic duels. But it had never seen dragons flown with purpose. And it had never seen someone like Aegon. Aegon was not loud. He didn't give long speeches about destiny. He didn't pound his chest or say things like, "I was born to rule." He simply made a choice. A clear one. A choice that sounded calm but changed history forever. We will go west. And that was it. He didn't go alone, of course. Beside him were his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, 2 women who were as different as fire and smoke but equally dangerous in their own ways. Visenya was sharp, steady, and fearless. Holding a sword felt as natural to her as breathing. If you annoyed her, you might get a warning glare, or you might get cut. She didn't like guessing games. Rhaenys, on the other hand, was warm and curious. She loved songs, stories, and flying for the joy of the sky. She once said she spent more time on Dragonback than on her own feet, and honestly, everyone believed her. And then there were the dragons. Aegon rode Balerion, the Black Dread, a dragon so huge people swore he could blot out the sun. Visenya rode Vhagar, smaller than Balerion but still massive enough to make armies rethink their life choices. Rhaenys rode Meraxes, swift and silver, a dragon that loved the open air as much as she did. Together, the 3 of them looked less like a family and more like a moving natural disaster. The invasion begins. The first target was not a city or a king. It was a simple peninsula at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. Aegon landed there with a small army, tiny, really, compared to the huge forces of Westeros. But size didn't matter when you had 3 dragons circling above you like giant burning guardians. Aegon set up camp, placed a wooden table for planning, and stabbed his sword into the ground. The sword was Blackfire, the Valyrian steel blade of House Targaryen. And stabbing it into the dirt wasn't just dramatic, it was symbolic. This land was now claimed. Soon after, the first kings noticed. And let me tell you, they were not thrilled. 2 of them, King Argilac the Arrogant of the Stormlands and King Harren the Black of the Riverlands, decided to be the first to challenge Aegon. Aegon accepted the challenge with suspiciously calm confidence. The kind of confidence you have only when you know you have a giant fire-breathing lizard behind you. The burning of Harrenhal. Harren the Black thought he was safe. He had built Harrenhal, the biggest castle ever made, with towers so tall they scraped the sky. He believed walls could stop anything. But walls don't stop dragons. Aegon flew to Harrenhal on Balerion. The great black dragon swooped down, shadows falling over the castle like a dark storm cloud. Balerion breathed fire. Stone boiled. Towers cracked. The massive fortress melted. Harrenhal burned like dry paper. And King Harren the Black became, well, King Harren the Crispy. That was the moment Westeros realized this was not a normal war. Visenya and Rhaenys spread the flame. While Aegon was melting one king, his sisters were making sure the others didn't get comfortable. Visenya flew north and dealt with the Vale. Not by burning anything, but by showing off. She landed on the Ares' high courtyard, something no one thought was possible. When the young boy lord saw her dragon, he announced he would rather bend the knee now than become a cooked bird later. Rhaenys flew south to the Reach. She brought songs, warmth, and friendly smiles, because sometimes charm works even better than fire. But she also brought Meraxes, so everyone listened very carefully. The Field of Fire. But the greatest battle of the conquest came when 2 kings decided to team up, King Mern IX of the Reach and King Loren Lannister of the Rock. Together, they gathered the largest army Westeros had ever seen, about 55,000 men. Aegon had maybe 10,000. This looked like a problem. Until the dragons arrived. Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys flew over the battlefield together, and for the first and only time in history, 3 full-grown dragons joined in a single fight. What happened next was remembered as the Field of Fire. Flames swept across the dry grass. Armies broke like waves. Shields melted. Swords turned to puddles. Men fled in every direction, dropping armor as they ran. When it was over, King Mern was dead. King Loren bent the knee. And the rest of Westeros shook with fear. After that battle, everyone understood something important. You can fight men. You can fight armies. But you do not fight dragons. Submission of the kingdoms. One by one, the kings of Westeros surrendered. The Riverlands chose Aegon. The Reach chose Aegon. The Westerlands chose Aegon. The Vale chose Aegon. Even the North, proud and cold as ever, bowed after a peaceful meeting with Aegon and his dragon Balerion. The Starks decided they liked being chilly, not grilled. Only Dorne refused. Dorne looked at the dragons and said, "No thank you, we're busy." They resisted fiercely and cleverly, using their deserts and mountains to avoid open battle. Aegon did not conquer Dorne in his lifetime, but that was a problem for his heirs. For now, almost all of Westeros belonged to him. The coronation at Oldtown. Aegon did not rush to call himself king. Instead, he rode south to Oldtown, the city of learning, faith, and very polite maesters. The High Septon himself blessed Aegon, placing a crown upon his head. There, in a sunlit ceremony, Aegon became Aegon I Targaryen, first of his name, king of all Westeros. Not king of the 7 kingdoms. Not king of Dragonstone. King of all Westeros. A new age began. Forging the Iron Throne. Aegon needed a symbol for his new rule. Something strong. Something undeniable. Something that reminded everyone that this peace had been earned through fire. So he gathered the swords of his fallen enemies, thousands of them. He had the metal melted by dragonfire. And from that glowing heap, he forged the most uncomfortable chair ever made. The Iron Throne. Sharp edges. Twisted blades. No cushions. No comfort. A throne that said, being king is not supposed to feel nice. Aegon accepted that truth. He ruled from that harsh seat, with dragons at his back and a dream of empire in his heart. The conquest was done. But ruling the world? That journey was just beginning. The early kings, building a dynasty of fire. When Aegon the Conqueror finally sat on the Iron Throne, he probably understood right away that this thing was not a comfy chair. It poked you. It scratched you. It reminded you every second that ruling Westeros was never going to be peaceful. But Aegon handled it with calm strength. He was the kind of king who didn't need to shout. His presence alone was enough. Aegon ruled for almost 40 years, and those decades shaped the future of his new kingdom more than any fire or battle ever had. His job wasn't to conquer anymore. His job was to hold. And holding Westeros together was its own kind of war. He traveled the kingdom often, not just for show. He wanted people to see him, not as a distant dragon lord from Valyria, but as their king. He met lords, listened to small folk, settled disputes, and tried to fix problems before they started fires. He even learned enough of the local customs to avoid stepping on too many cultural toes. Aegon was smart like that. He knew that swords could win battles, but trust won realms. He also knew when not to poke Dorne again. After all the trouble during the conquest, he wisely chose peace. Instead of trying to burn the desert into submission, he sent envoys, gifts, and good manners. Honestly, this might have been the hardest thing he ever did. Still, no matter how calm the conqueror acted, the kingdom was new, fragile, and full of pressure. And when Aegon died, the weight of that Iron Throne fell on someone far less ready. Aenys I, a nice guy in a hard world. Aenys Targaryen, Aegon's son, had the heart of a poet and the nerves of a bird in a thunderstorm. He liked songs, justs, and quiet conversations. This was all very sweet, but Westeros didn't want sweet. Westeros wanted a hammer. Preferably a hammer riding a dragon. Aenys was not that. When he took the throne, some lords doubted him from day one. But things got worse when he made decisions that looked too soft, too gentle, or too confusing for the rough world around him. One of these decisions, maybe the biggest, was allowing the marriage between his son Aegon and his daughter Rhaena. Sure, it kept Valyrian bloodline strong, but to the Faith of the Seven, this was a big no-no. And once the Faith got angry, the whole kingdom started vibrating with trouble. Rebellions rose. Many of them. One after another. People refused the crown, refused the laws, refused the idea of Targaryens marrying each other. Aenys tried to calm everyone with diplomacy, but he was playing a soothing lullaby while the crowd wanted battle drums. Meanwhile, guess who was watching all this chaos? Maegor. Aenys' half-brother. The kind of man who probably sharpened his sword just for fun. And maybe sharpened his stare too. Maegor the Cruel steps in. When things broke down completely, Aenys fled King's Landing. His confidence shattered. His health too. He died far from the Iron Throne, leaving behind a kingdom tearing at the seams. Then Maegor stepped forward. And everything changed in one heartbeat. Maegor Targaryen was not gentle. He was not patient. He wasn't even particularly political. He believed problems existed for one reason, to be crushed. If Aenys was a soft breeze on a warm day, Maegor was a sudden volcanic eruption that didn't apologize. He took the throne by force. He didn't even hesitate. When the High Septon declared him unlawful, Maegor's answer was simple: dragonfire. He mounted Balerion, the same dragon Aegon once rode, and brought the Black Dread back into the sky. What followed was not calm. Maegor burned rebel houses, smashed armies, and wiped out entire groups of faith militant. His rule was loud, violent, and terrifying. People called him Maegor the Cruel, but honestly, he might have thought it was a compliment. Building the Red Keep, in his own way. Maegor didn't just wage war. He also built. He wanted a strong capital, one that could never be taken from him. So he continued building the Red Keep, adding tunnels, secret ways, thick walls, and strange chambers no one fully understood. There's a rumor that when the builders finished the Red Keep, Maegor thanked them, and then made sure none of them ever left. You know, to protect the secrets of the castle. Classic Maegor. The Red Keep became a symbol of his rule. Powerful. Dark. A little terrifying. Family drama, but with dragons. Inside the Targaryen family, things were just as stormy. Aenys' widow, Queen Alyssa, fled the moment she could. She took her sons, Viserys and Jaehaerys, safely away from Maegor's claws. It was a smart move. Maegor did not like potential rivals. And calling Maegor unpredictable was like calling the ocean slightly wet. Rhaena, Aenys' daughter, wasn't so lucky. She ended up trapped in Maegor's court, forced into marriages she didn't want, used like a piece on a dragon-sized chessboard. She held on only because she had her dragon, Dreamfire, and a quiet strength that kept her alive. Even Maegor's own marriages were storms. He took several wives, hoping to produce an heir. But tragedy followed every birth. Stillborn children. Strange deaths. Some whispered that the Iron Throne itself rejected Maegor. Others whispered even darker things. But whispers were dangerous during his rule, so most people made sure to whisper far away. The realm pushed to the breaking point. Maegor's victories over the Faith looked impressive at first, but every win created more anger. Every fire he started created new smoke. Every punishment created new rebels. The kingdom wasn't calming down, it was gradually boiling. By the later years of his rule, more lords abandoned him. More banners turned away. More hearts broke under the weight of fear. Maegor ruled by force, but force alone can't hold a kingdom forever. And while Maegor tried to keep the throne through fear, a quiet hope began growing far from King's Landing. Aenys's son, Jaehaerys, the young prince hidden away by his mother, waited. Patient. Calm. Learning. Preparing. People began whispering his name too, but this time with hope, not fear. The end of Maegor. Maegor died in a way that still confuses historians. Some claim he killed himself. Others think someone helped him along. And some believe the Iron Throne finally decided it had had enough and cut him to death. Whichever version you like, the result was the same: Maegor was gone, and the realm exhaled for the first time in years. A dynasty shaken but alive. The early years of Targaryen rule were messy, emotional, and a little bit dramatic, okay, a lot dramatic. Aegon the Conqueror built the kingdom. Aenys tried to soften it. Maegor tried to smash it into shape. They were three very different men, but together, they forged the start of a dynasty that would rule for nearly 3 centuries. Fire builds. Fire destroys. And the Targaryens learned both lessons early. Jaehaerys the Wise, the peace of the realm. When Maegor the Cruel finally left the world, one way or another, the realm felt like it could breathe again. You could almost imagine the small folk peeking out of their doors like, is it safe now? For real? And standing there, calm and steady, was Jaehaerys Targaryen. A boy, yes. But a boy with a quiet sort of strength. The kind that didn't shout, didn't threaten, and definitely didn't roast people unless he had to. Jaehaerys would become one of the greatest kings in Westeros. Not because he conquered anything, but because he fixed things. He healed the wounds his father Aenys couldn't and his uncle Maegor wouldn't. And he didn't do it alone. Beside him, always, was Alysanne, the queen people loved more than their favorite songs. Together, they didn't just rule. They built. This chapter begins with them stepping forward into a broken kingdom, and slowly turning it into something golden. A boy king, but ready. Jaehaerys started young. Too young, honestly. 14 is barely old enough to lead a study group, let alone a kingdom full of angry lords. But he had something rare, a calm mind. From the moment he claimed the throne, he refused to fight with fear. No executions of rivals. No flames. No kneel or burn. People were confused at first. They had gotten used to Maegor's methods. But Jaehaerys gave them something different: respect. He told the Faith of the Seven that he meant peace. He offered apologies for Maegor's crimes. He even negotiated new agreements so the Faith militant would disband without more blood. It worked. For the first time in a long time, Westeros saw a ruler who cared more about fixing problems than breaking heads. Enter Alysanne, a queen of heart and fire. If Jaehaerys was the brain, Alysanne was the heart. Beautiful, yes. Graceful, sure. But more important, she understood people. She cared. She visited villages, listened to complaints, hugged children, comforted widows, and sometimes scolded lords who acted like spoiled toddlers. She also had a dragon named Silverwing, who was gentle by dragon standards. Not exactly a fire-breathing teddy bear, but close. Alysanne didn't just support Jaehaerys' rule, she shaped it. She pushed him, advised him, and pushed again when needed. They weren't perfect, but they were a team. A rare power couple in Westeros history where the love was real and the partnership strong. Some joked that Westeros was ruled by 2 monarchs, the king, and the queen who made sure the king didn't forget what kindness was. A golden age begins. Jaehaerys and Alysanne ruled for over 50 years. That's a long time to be in charge without getting tired, but somehow they kept going, building one reform after another. Their reign was so peaceful that later generations called it the Conciliators' era or simply the peace of the realm. Not because everything was perfect, nothing ever is, but because the foundation was strong. Here's what they changed, brick by brick. Roads, bridges, and a kingdom that finally connected. Before Jaehaerys, traveling across Westeros was a bit like going on a dangerous camping trip, lots of mud, broken bridges, bandits, and questionable smells. Jaehaerys changed that. He ordered new roads to be built, good ones. The most famous was the King's Road, stretching from King's Landing to the Wall. Straight, wide, and strong. Perfect for trade, travel, and marching armies, though he hoped not to use it for the last one. He built bridges that didn't collapse every spring. He repaired ports. He improved inns and markets. For the first time, the 7 kingdoms felt like one kingdom, not 7 neighbors who tolerated each other. It's amazing what a couple of solid roads can do. Laws that made sense, finally. Jaehaerys loved order. Maybe too much sometimes. He spent hours hearing petitions, studying old laws, and rewriting messy ones. He even gathered the greatest legal minds of his time to create a new, clear set of rules. This became known as Jaehaerys' Code. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. And it stuck. People appreciated knowing what the law actually was instead of guessing and hoping for the best. Social reforms, Alysanne's touch. While Jaehaerys handled the laws, Alysanne handled the hearts. She pushed for reforms that helped common people, especially women and children. Her most famous act was the Widow's Law, which protected women from being robbed or forced into remarriage after their husbands died. In a time when women often had no voice, this was huge. Alysanne also convinced Jaehaerys to lower some taxes, improve city safety, and build homes for the Night's Watch to help recruit good men instead of criminals and drunks. She even visited the Wall once, yes, the actual wall, where the brothers admired her so much that they built a new hall and named it after her, the Queen's Tower. Alysanne just had that effect on people. A stable realm. Mostly. With peace came growth. Cities expanded. Trade flourished. Dragons grew strong on Dragonstone. And for decades, everything felt steady. But nothing ever stays simple for long, especially with Targaryens. The biggest issue wasn't war, it was children. Jaehaerys and Alysanne had many kids. More than 10. Cute at first, but the bigger the family, the bigger the headaches. Especially when it came to succession. Who should rule after Jaehaerys? Their eldest son Aegon? Their clever daughter Sarah? Their strong sons Balon or Aemon? Or someone else entirely? The problem wasn't a lack of heirs. It was having too many. Some children died young. Some quarreled. Some left the court. Some made choices their parents disliked. Every twist created new questions about the future. Every question created quiet tension between nobles. Jaehaerys wanted peace, but even he couldn't fully control family drama. And Targaryen family drama often had consequences for the whole realm. Seeds of future storms. Even in the golden light of their long reign, tiny cracks began to show. One crack came from the succession. Another from the growing power of certain lords. Another from the fact that dragons were becoming symbols not just of unity, but of rivalry. And somewhere, deep beneath all that peace, the early seeds of future conflicts, yes, even the dance of the dragons, started to grow. Not loudly. Not openly. Just quietly. Silently. Waiting. A legacy that outshined the Iron Throne. By the end of their rule, Jaehaerys and Alysanne transformed Westeros more than any war ever had. They gave the kingdom peace. They gave it structure. They gave it love, laws, roads, and stability. And they left behind stories of a king and queen who actually made the realm better, a rare thing in a world where rulers were often too busy fighting, burning, or brooding on dragons. But even golden ages cast shadows. And after they were gone, the realm would face storms darker than anyone expected. For now, though, we leave Jaehaerys and Alysanne in their bright chapter, the calm before the future fires. The seeds of civil war, the Great Council and the question of heirs. When Jaehaerys the Wise grew old, very old, the kingdom started to worry about one thing that always comes back to haunt the Targaryens: who gets the crown next? Because nothing creates chaos faster than a Targaryen family reunion where everyone suddenly remembers they have claims to the throne. After ruling for more than 50 years, Jaehaerys had outlived many of his own children. His chosen heirs kept dying one by one, as if the Iron Throne itself was picky and kept rejecting applicants. By 101 AC, the king had reached a point where even he admitted he needed help deciding the next ruler. So he did something no one expected. He called for a great council. Not a small meeting. Not a quiet vote. A massive, kingdom-wide gathering where lords from all over Westeros came together to decide who should rule after the old king passed. This was a historic moment. Westeros had never seen anything like it. And honestly, neither had the Targaryens. They weren't used to asking people for opinions. Dragonlords usually just said, "I'm in charge," and everyone nodded quickly before the dragons noticed them. But times had changed. The Great Council of 101 AC. Imagine thousands of lords, knights, and maesters packing into Harrenhal. It must have felt a bit like a royal festival mixed with a political battlefield. There were banners, tents, armored guards, scribes running around with scrolls, and probably a lot of confused horses. Jaehaerys stayed away from the meeting itself. He didn't want to influence the final choice. It was up to the realm now. And the realm had two main candidates. First, Princess Rhaenys, daughter of the late Prince Aemon. She was the oldest child of Jaehaerys' oldest son. Smart, respected, and strong. She had dragons, she had noble support, and she had a solid claim. Second, Viserys, son of Prince Baelon, who was Aemon's younger brother. Viserys was pleasant, peaceful, and well-liked. Also a dragon rider. And importantly, he was a man. That last point mattered far more than it should have. Many lords argued Rhaenys should sit the throne. But others said a woman ruling would break tradition, or cause rebellions, or bring bad luck, or somehow make the crops die. People always come up with wild excuses when they just don't want change. Rhaenys earned the nickname, the Queen Who Never Was, which sounds poetic, but also kind of rude. In the end, after long debate and probably more than one dramatic speech, the council voted. They chose Viserys. And just like that, history shifted. Not with fire. Not with war. But with signatures on parchment. What the decision meant. Choosing Viserys didn't just decide the next king, it set a standard. It told the realm, okay, look, Targaryen daughters can claim the throne, but we mostly prefer sons. This wasn't written down as an official law. No one carved it into the Iron Throne or anything. But the message was loud, clear, and strong enough to echo through generations. A male heir is easier to accept than a female heir. That idea, soft on the surface, sharp underneath, would later explode the whole dynasty into civil war. But at the time, people shrugged and moved on. For now, Viserys became heir. The Great Council ended. The crowds left Harrenhal. But something had changed in the air. Something quiet. Something waiting. Viserys a peaceful start with storm clouds behind. When Jaehaerys finally passed, Viserys took the throne without trouble. He was warm, gentle, easy to talk to, maybe even too easy sometimes. People liked him. He liked feasts, music, and dragons. A very good vibes only sort of king. But Viserys also made one huge decision with long-term consequences. He named his daughter, Rhaenyra, as his heir. Yes, his daughter. A girl. The same situation the Great Council spent months debating. But Viserys didn't care. He loved Rhaenyra, trusted her, and believed she deserved the throne. This confused everyone who had cheered for him at the council. You can almost hear the lords whispering. Wait, didn't we go through all that trouble to avoid a female heir? Is the king ignoring the great council we literally just held? Should we ask him, or should we pretend we're fine because he has a dragon? Viserys simply didn't see the problem. He believed the council had chosen him, not his unborn children. And honestly, he didn't love political fights. He much preferred avoiding conflict altogether. So he raised Rhaenyra as the future ruler. She trained with maesters, spoke with lords, learned history, learned court manners, and became the shining star of the Red Keep. Princess Rhaenyra, the realm's delight. Rhaenyra grew into a confident, brave young woman. She rode the dragon Syrax, and she had a presence that filled every room. People adored her. She was called the realm's delight, and for a while, she really was. Her claim was strong, her father supported her, and the kingdom saw her as the future queen. But not everyone agreed. And one of the loudest doubters was someone very close to her. Prince Daemon, the rogue prince. Daemon Targaryen. Brother of Viserys. Warrior. Commander. Dragon rider of the fierce Caraxes. And a man who treated rules the same way he treated enemies, with complete disrespect. Daemon was charming, dangerous, and unpredictable. The kind of guy who could buy you a drink one day and start a war the next. He believed he should be heir. Not because he hated Rhaenyra, but because he believed the throne belonged to him by right, by blood, and by strength. In Daemon's mind, he was made for the crown. In Viserys' mind, Daemon was the last person who should wear it. This caused tension. A lot of it. Sometimes Viserys exiled Daemon. Sometimes he welcomed him back. It depended on the year, the mood, and how many headaches Daemon had given him that week. But one thing never changed: Daemon wanted power. He wanted legacy. He wanted a place in history. And Rhaenyra stood in his way. The court begins to split. In the Red Keep, small cracks began to appear in what looked like a peaceful reign. Some supported Rhaenyra. Some whispered that Daemon should be king. Some argued a woman could not rule. Some believed the Great Council's decision still mattered. And all of this happened quietly. Soft voices in hallways. Little nods between lords. Smiles that hid sharp opinions. The seeds of civil war rarely show up as thunder. They show up as whispers. A future waiting to burn. By choosing Viserys in 101 AC, the realm tried to keep things simple. But instead, the council started a slow chain reaction. Viserys naming Rhaenyra added another link. Daemon's ambition added another. Court politics added another. And together, these links formed a fuse that stretched across years, waiting for the spark. For now, though, Westeros stayed peaceful. But peace built on shaky ground never lasts forever. The Targaryens just didn't know yet that they were walking straight toward the greatest family war in their history. The Dance of the Dragons, a family consumed by fire. So, the Targaryens had peace for a while. Not perfect peace, not everyone hold hands and sing songs, peace, but still pretty good by their standards. But then King Viserys I died. And that's where everything started to fall apart like a badly built tower in a storm. You'd think a family with dragons would be too scared to fight each other. Nope. They said, let's start the biggest, messiest civil war the world has ever seen. And they did. When Viserys died, the kingdom basically split into two teams overnight. On one side, you had the Blacks, supporting his chosen heir, Princess Rhaenyra. On the other side, you had the Greens, backing her half-brother Aegon II. Why Blacks and Greens? Because the royal court basically started taking fashion sides, and people remembered which colors the ladies wore during an argument years before. This whole war had the vibe of, my dress looked better, so I win. Anyway, the Greens moved fast. They crowned Aegon II before Rhaenyra even heard about her father's death. It was one of the biggest betrayals in Westeros history. Imagine waking up, enjoying your morning tea, and someone tells you, oh, by the way, your brother stole your throne before breakfast. Rhaenyra was furious. Daemon, her uncle husband, yes, Targaryen family trees are a maze, was even more furious. And dragons? They were about to get involved too. Now, the dance of the dragons was not a dance. There was zero dancing. It was basically dragons plus politics plus revenge equals absolute chaos. And one of the darkest moments came early in the war. It's the moment that made every viewer of history go, okay, that escalated fast. I'm talking about blood and cheese. Daemon wanted revenge because the Greens killed his stepson. So he sent assassins, one nicknamed Blood, the other Cheese, to sneak into the royal keep. Their mission? You don't even want to know, but I'll tell you anyway because this is a documentary. They broke in, found the queen, and forced her to choose which of her sons would die. It's one of the most brutal stories in all of Westeros. In the end, the boy was killed, and the Greens were sent into mourning and fury. This moment pretty much guaranteed that peace was never coming back. Not for a long time. But the cruelty didn't stop there. Not long after, something happened that people still whisper about, the death of Lucerys Velaryon, Rhaenyra's young son. He flew on his dragon, Eryx, to deliver a message, peacefully, mind you, to Storm's End. But Aemon Targaryen, who rode the huge and terrifying dragon Vhagar, was there too. Let's just say the meeting went bad. Teen boys with dragons don't make great diplomats. Aemon chased Lucerys into a storm. Poor Eryx was no match for the ancient beast Vhagar. In the clouds and rain, Vhagar snapped both dragon and rider from the sky. Rhaenyra's heart pretty much shattered that day. And the war only grew darker. From that moment, it wasn't just a political fight. It became personal. Every battle was fueled not just by strategy but by pure grief and anger. Dragons burned castles, armies, and entire towns. People watched beasts they had worshipped for centuries become weapons of mass destruction. And the saddest thing? The dragons were dying too. One of the biggest battles of the war happened over a huge lake called the God's Eye. This is where Daemon Targaryen and Aemon Targaryen finally faced each other, dragon to dragon, like two mythic heroes in a tragic poem. Daemon rode Caraxes, the blood Wyrm. Aemon rode Vhagar, the dragon basically old enough to remember the first Targaryens brushing their hair. The fight was wild. Flames everywhere, shadows crashing through the clouds, two dragons biting and tearing at each other like they forgot they had riders. And in the middle of all that madness, Daemon did something only Daemon would do. He jumped off Caraxes, mid-air, and stabbed Aemon through the eye. Both riders fell. Both dragons crashed into the lake. Some say their bodies are still at the bottom, locked together forever. After that battle, the war spun out of control. More dragons died. Some were killed in battle, some were hunted, some died from wounds. The Targaryens started running out of the very creatures that had built their power. Even the small folk, normal people with no crowns or swords, began to hate dragons. They stormed the dragon pit in King's Landing, killing dragons with stones and spears. The dragons fought back, but the mob overwhelmed them. It was a terrible moment. A symbol of the end of an age. And while all of this chaos was happening, Rhaenyra finally took King's Landing and sat on the Iron Throne. But it wasn't the victory she imagined. The city hated her. The economy was wrecked. Her allies were dying faster than ravens could carry the news. It's like she won the game but lost the controller and the TV broke. Her rule didn't last long. The Greens kept fighting. The realm kept bleeding. And eventually, Rhaenyra was betrayed, captured, and delivered to Aegon II. What happened next? Let's just say it was not a peaceful ending. Aegon fed her to his dragon, Sunfire. In front of her last surviving son. It was the cruel full stop on a war that had already taken too much. But here's the twist, Aegon II didn't get to enjoy his victory. He didn't last long. He had no support, no energy, no future. Soon after, he died, poisoned, they say. And the crown passed to Rhaenyra's son, Aegon III, a child who grew up terrified of dragons after watching his mother's death. Under him, the last dragons slowly died out. The Targaryen power faded. The magic of their blood dropped to a whisper. The dance of the dragons ended not with triumph, but with ash. So many lives lost. So many dragons gone forever. The realm was broken, and the family at the center of it all was left in ruins. It was a war that proved something sad but true. Sometimes the greatest danger to a powerful house doesn't come from outside enemies, but from each other. Ashes of the Dance, a Shattered Dynasty. When the Dance of the Dragons finally ended, the realm didn't cheer, didn't celebrate, and definitely didn't throw a party. It just sat there, tired and broken, like a kingdom that hadn't slept in 3 years. Which, honestly, was kind of true. The war had burned everything. Towns, castles, families, hearts, and most painfully for the Targaryens, the dragons. And sitting on the Iron Throne after all that destruction was Aegon III, a boy who basically grew up in the middle of one long nightmare. His childhood? Not great. His dad died early. His mother, Rhaenyra, was fed to a dragon right in front of him. He survived battles, storms, betrayals, and more crying adults than any kid should see. By the time he became king, he was quiet, cold, and looked like someone who would rather be anywhere else, maybe living in a cave, far away from politics and sharp chairs made of swords. Aegon III was called the Dragonbane, but not because he hated dragons on purpose. He was just unlucky enough to rule during the time they died out. The dragons left alive after the dance were injured, sick, or too weak to fly. Some say the magic of old Valyria was fading. Some say the wounds of the war were too deep. And some say dragons just got tired of the Targaryens' drama. Honestly? Hard to blame them. One by one, the last few dragons took their final breaths. They didn't roar at the end, they just slipped quietly into the history books. And with their deaths, something deeper faded too, something ancient that lived in Targaryen blood. For thousands of years, dragons had been the heart of their power. Without them, the Targaryens felt almost normal. And they hated that feeling. Aegon III watched the last dragon die when he was still very young. People say he stood there silently, just staring, like he knew it wasn't only the creature that was dying, it was the end of an age. The end of the magic that made House Targaryen special. After that, he ordered the dragon keepers to keep trying to hatch eggs, but none ever hatched again. The huge stone eggs sat in the pits like cold memories, never waking. So now the Targaryens had to do what nobody ever expected, rule the realm without dragon fire. No giant flying beasts to scare people into behaving. No flaming shortcuts in battle. No sky-high power flexes. Just politics, councils, arguments, and paper. A lot of paper. The old kings would have been horrified. The kingdom itself was not in good shape either. After years of war, the roads were broken, crops ruined, and most families were grieving someone. The 7 kingdoms were still 7, but wow, they were 7 tired kingdoms. Rebuilding all of that was like trying to fix a house while it was still on fire. But the regents ruling for Aegon, since he was a kid, did their best. Some tried too hard. Some didn't try at all. And some caused new problems while fixing old ones. Classic Westeros. There were endless debates in the court. We should fix the ports first. No, the fields. No, the taxes. Everyone had ideas, but nobody had dragons, and that made everything slower. Still, little by little, the realm began to heal. Villages grew crops again. Trade started to move. People began to smile sometimes, even if the smiles were small and unsure. But the Targaryen magic, that never came back. It was like losing a voice they didn't know they needed until it was gone. Before the war, Targaryens were basically living symbols of fire and destiny. After the war, some people whispered that they were just silver-haired nobles with a tragic past and a talent for family drama. Even inside the royal family, things felt different. Older Targaryens could still remember seeing dragons in the sky, hearing their roars, feeling the ground shake. Younger ones had only stories. The bond between rider and beast became a legend, something to read in books but never see again. The palace felt quieter. The dragon pit was just a huge empty shell, full of bones and echoes. Aegon III carried the weight of all this in his heart. He wasn't the warmest king. He rarely smiled, barely talked, and walked around like someone carrying a ghost on his back. But honestly, can we blame him? If most of your childhood memories involve fires, wars, and losing everyone you love, you'd probably turn a little gloomy too. Still, he wasn't a bad ruler. He just ruled with a quiet hand. He listened more than he spoke. He tried not to start more wars. He focused on steadying the realm and making sure no one else had to go through what he went through. That alone made him better than some of the flashy, fiery kings before him. His trauma shaped the next generations, too. The Targaryen kings who came after him grew up hearing about the dance, the betrayals, the dragons dying, the kingdom burning. Some of them tried hard to avoid conflict. Some tried too hard to bring back the old power. And some, well, some didn't learn anything at all. That's royal families for you. But one thing always stayed in the back of everyone's mind: the kingdom once had dragons. Real dragons. And the people who ruled had magic in their blood. The loss of that power didn't just weaken the crown, it changed the culture. Songs grew sadder. Stories grew darker. People started looking back at the Age of Dragons like a dream they'd never see again. Scholars studied old scrolls, trying to understand what went wrong. Alchemists poked at dragon eggs, hoping they'd crack open someday. Targaryen princes prayed to forgotten gods, asking for fire to return. But nothing worked. The world had moved on, leaving the Targaryens standing in the ashes of their past. And that's the quiet tragedy of this chapter. The war didn't just take lives. It took a whole era. A whole identity. The Targaryens survived, yes, but the fire that made them special flickered out. And the kings who came after Aegon III had to carry that weight. Ruling with the memory of what once was, knowing they might never see it again. But history has a funny way of surprising people. And the story of the Targaryens, well, it's not done yet. Not even close. The resurgence of power, Baelor, Viserys II, and Aegon IV. After Aegon III's heavy, quiet rule, the Targaryen dynasty moved into a strange new era. The dragons were gone, but the family still had the Iron Throne, a lot of ambition, and a long list of problems to solve. And next in line was a king who definitely left an impression, just maybe not the kind anyone expected. His name was Baelor, better known as Baelor the Blessed. And wow, he was blessed. Maybe too blessed. If you ever wondered what it would look like if a monk became king, Baelor is your answer. He prayed more than he ruled, fasted so much you'd think he was trying to become see-through, and spent more time in temples than the people who actually lived in them. Don't get me wrong, Baelor had a kind heart. He truly wanted peace. He wanted love and harmony. He wanted to end conflict forever, which is sweet, but also, this is Westeros. Ending conflict here is like trying to stop a storm with a spoon. But Baelor tried anyway. One of his most famous moments was when he personally walked barefoot to Dorne to negotiate peace after the long Dornish wars. Barefoot. Across hundreds of miles. Through rocks, dust, thorns, and probably a lot of things we shouldn't describe in a bedtime story. But it worked. Kind of. Dornish princes welcomed him, gave him water, asked him why he didn't just send a raven like a normal king. Baelor also built the Great September of Baelor, a huge temple in King's Landing that later became one of the biggest landmarks in the city. People respected him for his piety, but also worried about him. This is the same king who locked his sisters in a tower because he thought the world was too sinful for them. They were not amused. One of them even said, "I'd rather face a dragon than another sermon." And honestly, fair. By the end of his reign, Baelor had fasted so much that his body basically gave up. He died at a young age, leaving behind a very peaceful but very confused kingdom. Baelor's rule was one big reminder that being holy doesn't always mean being a great leader. After him came someone very different, Viserys II. And good news, he was actually competent. The man had brains, patience, and something the kingdom really needed, common sense. He had been hand of the king under 3 rulers, and now he finally had the crown himself. The realm breathed out one long, thank goodness. Viserys II didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't try to convert anyone. He just got to work fixing Baelor's mess. He balanced the books, reorganized the administration, and restored royal power that had been slowly slipping away. He also paid attention to trade and money, things kings often ignored because they're not as flashy as wars or giant statues. But Viserys liked details, and the kingdom needed details. People say Viserys II had the calm energy of someone who always knew where he put his keys. No drama. No chaos. Just steady improvement. If the Targaryen dynasty were a house, he was the guy who finally fixed the leaky roof. But his reign didn't last long, only about a year. Just when things were looking stable, he died. Some say it was natural. Some say it wasn't. But either way, his short time on the throne left the realm better off than before. And then came someone very different. Someone who really changed the mood. Enter Aegon IV, better known as Aegon the Unworthy. And oh boy, the nickname fits. If Baelor was Saint Mode and Viserys was Smart Mode, Aegon IV was Disaster Mode. He liked food, wine, gold, and women, lots of women. His hobbies included ignoring the kingdom, insulting people who tried to help him, and making terrible decisions. Aegon IV was the kind of king who made you look at the Iron Throne and think, maybe this whole monarchy thing was a mistake. He weakened the army, wasted money, dismissed good advisors, and surrounded himself with people who told him he was amazing. Spoiler, he was not amazing. But he didn't want honesty. He wanted entertainment. Then there were his children. Aegon had so many kids outside of marriage that counting them became a hobby for bored maesters. They called them great bastards, because many of them were talented, strong, and recognized by the king. People whispered constantly about who would inherit what, and who might cause trouble. But Aegon IV didn't stop there. On his deathbed, probably sweating out the results of a lifetime of bad choices, he did one last dramatic thing. Something that made the entire realm gasp. He legitimized all his bastards. All of them. With one royal decree. Just like that. The moment he did that, the line of succession didn't just blur. It shattered. Every great bastard suddenly had a claim. Some had armies. Some had strong personalities. Some had dragons in their ancestry, even if no dragon survived anymore. Aegon's last gift to Westeros was the biggest, messiest family problem in history. And the seeds he planted? They soon grew into a series of massive conflicts, the Blackfyre rebellions. These rebellions would tear the realm apart again, with brothers fighting brothers, cousins fighting cousins, and everyone arguing over who truly deserved the crown. All because Aegon IV couldn't resist creating a little chaos before leaving the world. To be fair, the Targaryen line had already faced worse, dragons dying, kingdoms burning, civil wars. But this time the danger wasn't magical or fiery. It was political. Quiet at first, then loud. Slow, then explosive. The legacy of Aegon IV was not a kingdom at peace. It was a ticking bomb. So this chapter gives us 3 kings, each one changing the dynasty in a different way. Baelor the Blessed tried to turn the realm holy and nearly starve himself doing it. Viserys II restored order with calm intelligence and actually made things better. And Aegon IV, well, he left a mess that would haunt the Targaryens for generations. The dragons were gone. The magic was fading. And now the politics were getting sharper again. The stage was set for new storms, and the Targaryen family, once the masters of fire, was about to face a new kind of danger, one that couldn't be burned away. The Blackfyre rebellions, brother against brother. If you thought the Targaryens were done tearing each other apart after the Dance of the Dragons, think again. The family looked at their history of civil war and basically said, you know what? Let's run that back, this time without dragons. And that was how Westeros found itself slipping into another major conflict, the Blackfyre rebellions. To understand how this chaos started, we need to talk about a very important man, Daemon Blackfyre. And honestly, he had everything a hero, or a villain, could ask for. He was tall, handsome, charming, strong in battle, and he had that classic Targaryen look, silver hair, purple eyes, the whole shiny package. But he wasn't born from a queen. He was one of the great bastards of Aegon IV, the king we met earlier who loved bad decisions more than he loved ruling. Now, Aegon IV didn't just acknowledge Daemon. He adored him. When Daemon was still a boy, Aegon gave him something powerful, something more important than lands or castles. He gave him the sword Blackfyre. This wasn't just any sword. This was the ancestral Valyrian steel blade of the Targaryen kings, the same sword Aegon the Conqueror carried when he took the 7 kingdoms. Blackfyre wasn't just metal. It was a symbol. A glowing neon sign that said, this boy might be king someday. And people noticed. After Aegon IV died and legitimized all his bastards on his deathbed, because of course he did, there was suddenly a long line of potential claimants. But Daemon stood out. He wasn't only gifted with the royal sword, he had the looks, the charisma, and the support of many powerful houses. Some believed he should be king instead of his half-brother, Daeron II, the official heir. Daeron II was more book-smart, more diplomatic, and let's just say he didn't shine as brightly in battle as Daemon did. Daeron was the, let's talk about this calmly, type. Daemon was the, give me a sword and a cool speech, type. The realm was divided between them, and once again Westeros picked sides like it was choosing teams for the deadliest game of dodgeball ever. And so the first Blackfyre rebellion began. The whole realm felt the tension. Old lords whispered about ancient rights. Young knights sharpened their swords. Banners flew. Songs were written. And everyone knew that Daemon wasn't just another pretender, he was someone who could actually win. When he raised the sword Blackfyre and declared his claim, thousands followed him. When Daemon rode into battle, the sword shone like a flame in the sun. People said the sword itself made men kneel. But Daeron II was no fool. He had loyal supporters too, especially Bloodraven, one of Daemon's half-brothers, who looked like he came straight out of a spooky prophecy. Pale skin, red eyes, white hair, and a reputation for being just a little too comfortable with dark magic. Bloodraven fought for Daeron with the kind of cold intelligence you don't want to face on a battlefield. The climactic battle came at the Redgrass Field, a name that tells you exactly how the fight went. The grass wasn't red before the battle. But afterward, well, you get the idea. Demon Blackfire and his sons fought with incredible bravery. For a moment, it looked like he might actually win. But Bloodraven and his archers had other plans. With precise arrows, mysterious, totally not magic arrows, as Bloodraven would say, they struck Demon down. When Demon fell, holding Blackfire in his hands, his rebellion fell with him. But not completely. His supporters didn't disappear. They regrouped, escaped, and kept the dream alive. And this dream turned into something big. Introducing the Golden Company. When the loyalists of House Blackfire fled west, they ended up in the free cities, far from home. There, a man named Bittersteel, another of Aegon the Unworthy's many sons, gathered all the exiles, soldiers, and broken lords who still believed the Blackfire line should rule. These men had lost their homes, their families, and their purpose. Bittersteel gave them a new one. He created the Golden Company, a Sellsword army famous across Essos, known for discipline, loyalty, gold armor, and a motto that basically said, "We do not break contracts no matter what." But let's be real, their secret motto could have been, "We're totally coming back to Westeros one day." And come back they did. Again and again. Because the death of Demon Blackfire didn't end anything. It just started a long chain of rebellions. The second Blackfire rebellion, the third, the fourth, and even a fifth. Honestly, at some point, the Targaryens were probably tired of hearing the phrase, Blackfire claim. But the Blackfires didn't give up. They fought for generations, like a shadow dynasty haunting the real one. Each rebellion changed Westeros in different ways. Some were smaller, some were huge, but all of them slowly chipped away at the strength of House Targaryen. Every war drained money. Every war broke alliances. Every war made the people lose a little more faith in the silver-haired rulers who kept ending up in family arguments that set the whole kingdom on fire. And while the Targaryens in King's Landing tried to rule with peace and order, the Blackfires became symbols of something different: rebellion, ambition, the hunger for a different kind of Targaryen rule. For some, they were heroes. For others, they were traitors. For everyone, they were trouble. By the time the last Blackfire rebellions ended, the dynasty wasn't the same. The Targaryens still had the Iron Throne, but the golden glow around their name had dimmed. They were weaker, more divided, and more tired. The Blackfire threat had been like a long winter, cold, relentless, draining. And the Golden Company? They remained in Essos, still waiting for a chance to return to Westeros someday with a true king. Their gold armor shone, their loyalty stayed unbroken, and their reputation only grew. So this chapter in Targaryen history shows us something important: you don't need dragons to tear a realm apart. You just need a family with too many claimants, one symbolic sword, and a very dramatic habit of settling arguments with wars. The Blackfire rebellions didn't burn towns the way Dragonfire did. But they burned time, hope, and unity. And they left the Targaryen dynasty weaker than ever, just as new storms were waiting on the horizon. The tragedy of Summerhall and the last dragon's hope. So, picture this: the Targaryen story is rolling into the later chapters, things are getting quieter on the dragon front, and suddenly, we meet a king who started his life as basically a side character. That's Aegon V. Or as most folks knew him before the crown, Egg. Yeah. A whole king named Egg. And honestly, he owned it. Aegon's rise is the kind of tale bards love because it makes them feel like anyone could become king, though let's be real, it helps when your bloodline includes dragons, even if they're extinct. He started as the tag-along squire to Ser Duncan the Tall, a knight with a good heart and terrible luck. Together they wandered the Seven Kingdoms, solving random problems like traveling social workers. Egg kept his royal identity a secret most of the time, which must have been awkward. Imagine trying to scold someone for disrespecting you while also pretending you're just some barefoot kid with a shave job haircut. Eventually, though, Egg's secret didn't stay secret forever. Politics pulled him back toward King's Landing, and then, boom, suddenly he's not just Aegon, he's Aegon V, ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Probably the biggest glow-up Westeros had seen in decades. Once he became king, Aegon V decided he wasn't just going to sit on the throne polishing the armrests like some rulers are known to do. No, Egg wanted change. Big change. He looked around Westeros and said, basically, we can do better. And honestly, he was right. The realm was filled with lords who treated their peasants like background furniture, and Aegon hated that. He wanted fair laws, lower corruption, and less of the random famine lifestyle the small folk were used to. But here's the thing about improving a kingdom, it annoys people. Especially the very lords who benefit from the "it's always been this way" system. So Aegon's reign quickly turned into a long battle between "let's help the people" and "but we're rich, stop bothering us." Even Duncan the Tall got pulled into trouble because of Egg's reforms, especially after the whole "marrying for love" incident with Rhaena Targaryen. Turns out, the upper lords of Westeros don't like when a princess chooses a knight with no castle, no money, and armor held together with hope. Still, Aegon kept trying. He pushed for land reforms, safer roads, better legal protections for commoners, and even diplomatic balancing acts with the faith. He was one of the few kings whose heart was absolutely in the right place. The problem was that Westeros, as usual, was not. And then, there's the dragons. By Aegon V's time, the dragons were long gone. Not weak. Not rare. Gone. The world felt quieter without them, and for a Targaryen that silence felt wrong, like losing a part of their soul. Aegon believed, and probably feared, that without dragons, his house was fading. Their magic was dimming. Their power was slipping. And maybe, in some deep corner of his mind, he felt that Westeros needed dragons too, even if just to hold everything in balance. So he started looking into ways to bring them back. Bad idea? Maybe. But were the Targaryens known for good ideas when it came to fire and prophecy? Absolutely not. Aegon gathered knowledge, lore, rumors, and probably a pile of dusty books nobody had touched for a century. Alchemists were invited. Woods witches were whispered to. Anything even slightly related to hatching dragon eggs was studied. And eventually, everything pointed to one place, Summerhall, the Targaryens' bright and almost too pretty southern palace. Summerhall was meant to be a retreat, a place for celebrations and peaceful thoughts. Instead, it became the center of a plan that would go down in history as one of the most mysterious disasters Westeros ever saw. That brings us to the tragedy of Summerhall. We don't know every detail. Westerosi historians are very good at losing important information, but we do know this: Aegon V gathered people, dragon eggs, magical theories, and probably way too much wildfire into one place. He wanted to hatch dragons the old way, the Targaryen way, with fire and courage, and it all went horribly wrong. One moment, Summerhall was a royal celebration. The next, it was flames, unstoppable, roaring flames that swallowed the palace, the trees, the walls, and nearly everyone inside. The fire burned so hot that stories say it looked like a second sun rising. And in the chaos, the king died. Duncan the Tall died. Dozens more died. No dragons hatched. What did come from Summerhall, though, was something unexpected: a birth. Because on that same tragic night, Princess Riella gave birth to a child, one who would grow up with songs and whispers already clinging to his name. A baby born in fire. A baby whose life seemed marked by prophecy before he even opened his eyes. That child was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. People would later say he was born in the shadow of Summerhall's flames, and that maybe that fire left something on him, a sense of destiny, a sense of doom, or just a fascination with everything tragic and poetic. Which, if you know Rhaegar, fits way too perfectly. Some believed Aegon's attempt to bring back the dragons wasn't just about restoring the dynasty's power. They said it was tied to old prophecies, the ones about the prince who was promised, the Song of Ice and Fire, the long night yet to come. Maybe Aegon wanted dragons not to rule, but to save the world. Or maybe he simply wanted to revive the glory of his house. The truth is buried under Summerhall's ashes. What we do know is that the event marked a turning point. After Summerhall, the Targaryens were more fragile than ever. Their power had shrunk to politics and memory. No dragons. No magic. Just the weight of 1,000 years of history on their shoulders. And yet, in that one newborn prince, the realm saw a spark. Maybe even hope. So, Chapter 12 ends on this eerie note: a king dies chasing fire, a child is born surrounded by it, and Westeros continues stumbling forward, unaware that this baby, quiet, thoughtful, silver-haired little Rhaegar, will grow up to change everything again. But for now, the Targaryen dynasty leaves Summerhall carrying grief, and a prophecy whispering behind it. Mad King, Mad Times, Aerys II and the Fall. Alright, welcome to one of the wildest chapters in Targaryen history. If the dynasty had a rock-bottom moment, this is definitely it. And at the center of the whole mess? Aerys II Targaryen, better known as the Mad King. But here's the twist: he didn't start mad. In fact, his early days were surprisingly decent. When Aerys first took the throne, people actually liked him. He was young, energetic, charming in that dramatic Targaryen way, and he talked big about rebuilding the realm. He wanted peace, prosperity, dazzling projects, maybe even a shiny new golden age. Basically, he sounded like a newsletter full of positive vibes. His hand, Tywin Lannister, handled most of the actual work, which many kings are perfectly happy with. But Aerys saw Tywin's success and thought, hey wait, shouldn't I be the star of this show? So a little jealousy began to simmer. Still, in these early years, the kingdom was stable. Aerys attended parties, smiled, looked royal, and tried not to trip over his own cloak. You know, basic king skills. But little cracks were already forming. Aerys had a touch of insecurity. He also loved grand gestures that didn't always make sense. And when people pushed back or laughed behind his back, he took it personally. So when destiny delivered a huge humiliation, Tywin's wife Joanna giving birth to twins at Casterly Rock on the same day Aerys and Queen Rhaella lost their own newborn, those cracks widened. Still, things would have stayed more or less steady if not for one event that changed Aerys forever: Duskendale. In Duskendale, the king got captured, yes, captured, like some random merchant prince, not the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. The town just grabbed him and said, "We're keeping him until we get better laws." It was embarrassing, terrifying, and gave Aerys a full mental breakdown. He spent months locked in a cell, terrified of shadows, replaying every insult anyone had ever given him. When Tywin's men finally freed him, Aerys didn't come out grateful. He came out paranoid. He came out angry. And he came out with this new idea in his head that literally everyone wanted to kill him. From that moment on, the Aerys who wanted to be a good king vanished. The Mad King walked out instead. He stopped trusting Tywin. He stopped trusting his own council. He stopped trusting his wife, his guards, his servants, his shadow, his food, and possibly even the sun. His rule became a long parade of terrible choices. He burned people for tiny reasons. He fired anyone who gave advice. He glued himself to the idea that wildfire, that green magical fire that even Dragonstone sorcerers treated with caution, would be his secret to absolute safety. Aerys loved wildfire like normal people love chocolate. It got to the point where the pyromancers were basically his best friends. They must have thought they won the lottery, a king who bought their entire stock and asked for more. Not suspicious at all. As all this chaos was happening, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was growing into a very different person. Remember, Rhaegar was born during the flames of Summerhall, and he carried that strange destiny feeling his whole life. He loved books, music, and prophecies. But he also understood duty and tried to carry himself like a noble prince. While Aerys was spiraling into burn them all territory, Rhaegar was quietly reading about the prince who was promised, the Song of Ice and Fire, and every mystical scrap related to saving the realm. People said he was thoughtful. Some said he was sad. And a few whispered that maybe he was waiting for something, or someone. That brings us to Lyanna Stark, the girl who would accidentally help set off the biggest rebellion of the era. Lyanna wasn't a princess. She wasn't from the south. She was a northern teenager with a good heart, a wild streak, and a habit of speaking her mind. At the great tourney at Harrenhal, Rhaegar saw her. And whatever he thought in that moment, destiny, prophecy, true love, who knows, it set everything on fire. There are a million theories about what really happened between them, but one fact is certain: when Rhaegar took Lyanna and vanished, the realm exploded. Lyanna's family demanded answers. King Aerys demanded hostages. Brandon Stark rode south shouting for Rhaegar to come out and fight. Aerys arrested him. Then he demanded the fathers come plead for their sons. And when they did, Aerys burned them alive. At this point, even the most patient houses said, "Yeah, no, we're done." That was the spark of Robert's rebellion. Robert Baratheon stepped up with his warhammer. Ned Stark joined with calm northern fury. Jon Arryn added old honor. The realm split into two sides, Aerys and the Loyalists versus basically everyone tired of him screaming about wildfire. The battles rolled across Westeros, Ashford, the Bells, the Trident, and bit by bit, Aerys' forces fell apart. Rhaegar returned to lead the Loyalists, wearing armor covered in rubies, but Robert smashed him down at the Battle of the Trident, ending the prince's life and shattering the last real hope for Aerys' cause. Back in King's Landing, Aerys prepared his final act of madness. He ordered wildfire hidden all over the city. His plan? If he couldn't rule Westeros, he would burn it instead. Burn them all, he told his pyromancers. He repeated it so often that the guards were terrified to be near him. But then came Ser Jaime Lannister, the young Kingsguard knight everyone underestimated. When he realized the king was about to blow up the entire capital, Jaime made his choice. He killed the pyromancer. Then he killed the king. And with that, the Targaryen dynasty that had ruled for nearly 300 years collapsed in a puddle of wildfire fumes and tragedy. But the story doesn't end there. Across the narrow sea, two children survived, Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. They were smuggled out before the siege, tiny pieces of a broken dynasty carried into exile. Viserys grew bitter, obsessed with reclaiming the throne. Daenerys grew quiet, gentle, unsure of her place in the world. Nobody guessed she would one day become the single most dangerous Targaryen since Aegon the Conqueror. And with that, the age of dragons, madness, prophecy, and fire faded, at least for the moment. The Mad King was gone. The realm had new rulers. And two exiled children would carry the last embers of House Targaryen into a future both bright and terrible. Stormborn, Daenerys and the rebirth of a house. Daenerys Targaryen entered the world in the middle of a storm, literally. Rain, wind, thunder, the whole dramatic package. Some babies get a soft blanket and a warm cradle. Daenerys got a hurricane-smashing dragonstone. That's why she's called Daenerys Stormborn, which, honestly, sounds like an album title from a very intense rock band. Her father, Aerys too, had just died in the chaos of Robert's rebellion. Her mother died right after giving birth. So from her first breath, Dany was an orphan, a refugee, and the last hope of a dynasty that had ruled Westeros for nearly 3 centuries. No pressure at all. Her only family was her brother Viserys, who was older, stressed, and basically one bad day away from snapping like a cheap bowstring. Viserys told her stories about their father, their lost home, their dragons, and how the Iron Throne was stolen from them. But because Viserys was, well, Viserys, he didn't tell these stories lovingly. He yelled them at her. Usually while pacing. The two of them wandered through the free cities, moving from one rich patron to another like very fancy couch surfers. Dany grew up quiet, careful, and always nervous. Viserys grew up angry, paranoid, and convinced he was born to be king. He didn't have dragons. He didn't have an army. He didn't have money. But he had ego. So much ego. Dany learned early on that Viserys saw her less as a sister and more as a bargaining chip. He wanted an army, and armies aren't free. So when Illyrio Mopatis, a rich merchant with the world's most luxurious mustache, suggested they form an alliance with the Dothraki, Viserys agreed instantly. Which meant marrying Daenerys to Khal Drogo, a warlord with a braid long enough to whip someone across the room. Dany was terrified. She was 13. She didn't speak the language. She had never even ridden a horse. And now she was supposed to marry a man whose idea of a wedding gift was probably a sword or a dead enemy. But the marriage changed everything. Khal Drogo wasn't the monster Viserys made her expect. He was a warrior, sure, but he treated her with respect. Slow patience. Actual kindness. And that gave Dany something she'd never had before, confidence. She started riding horses. Eating new foods. Learning Dothraki words. Acting like someone who could make decisions instead of running from them. And Viserys hated it. He wanted to be the center of everything. He wanted Drogo's army. He wanted his throne. So he started picking fights, insulting people, and threatening Dany. None of it worked. Dany was changing. Becoming stronger. Braver. And then Viserys made the stupidest decision of his life. He threatened Daenerys in front of Khal Drogo. Swords were drawn. Everyone froze. And Viserys learned a lesson the hard way: metal melts when you pour molten gold onto someone's head. He wanted a crown. Drogo gave him one. A very hot one. With Viserys gone, Daenerys was free for the first time. She fully stepped into her role as Khaleesi. She protected her followers, challenged her husband, and even saved some women who were supposed to be gifts for the Khalasar. She started to believe she had a destiny, something bigger than exile and fear. But fate wasn't done being dramatic. After Drogo was wounded in a fight, Dany tried to save him using a healer's magic. It went horribly wrong. Drogo lived, but only as a shell of a man. And Dany's unborn child died. It was the lowest moment of her life. Her world collapsed again. She could have given up. But she didn't. At Drogo's funeral, she placed 3 stone dragon eggs, gifts from her wedding, on the pyre. Then she walked straight into the flames. The Khalasar thought she was committing suicide. Some cried. Some shrugged. Some wondered who would feed the horses now. Then the sun rose. And Daenerys walked out of the ashes alive, untouched, and carrying 3 baby dragons, the first dragons the world had seen in more than a century. Fire didn't burn her. It crowned her. Magic returned to the world through her, and with it, the rebirth of House Targaryen. From that moment, she wasn't just Daenerys Stormborn. She wasn't just a widowed queen. She wasn't just a scared girl running from her past. She was mother of dragons. With her tiny dragons screaming like angry kettles, Dany began her journey across Essos. She didn't have a giant army or treasure. But she had something more powerful, the belief that she was meant to change the world. Her first big move came in Astapor, where she met the Unsullied, elite slave soldiers trained from childhood. Their discipline was unmatched. Their lives were heartbreakingly harsh. So Dany did something no one expected. She pretended to buy them, then freed them instead. And when the slavers tried to protest, Drogon showed them how fire solves problems. The Unsullied chose to follow her. Not as slaves. As free men. Next came Yunkai, which fell after a clever mix of strategy and, please stop underestimating me. Then Meereen, the largest and hardest city she faced. She conquered it, freed its slaves, and tried to rule it. And ruling was way harder than fighting. She dealt with politics, assassins, rebellions, angry nobles, and people who didn't know whether to worship her or stab her. She made mistakes. Big ones. But she kept learning. She kept trying. And all along, her dragons grew stronger. Drogon became a living furnace with wings. Rhaegal and Viserion grew bolder. Her legend spread from city to city. Some called her a savior. Some called her a tyrant in the making. But everyone knew her name. Through it all, Daenerys clung to one idea: destiny. She believed she was meant to reclaim her family's legacy. Not just for power. Not just for pride. But because she was the last Targaryen who could make the world better. She believed her blood gave her purpose. She believed she had been chosen, by fire, by prophecy, or maybe by fate itself. And with each victory, each dragon roar, each freed city, it became harder to doubt her. The girl who was once sold for an army had become a queen in her own right. She rose from storms, fire, and loss. She had survived Viserys, survived exile, survived betrayal, survived the funeral pyre. And with her dragons circling the sky, Daenerys Targaryen stood ready to bring the Targaryen name back to the world, not as a whisper, but as a storm. Fire and Destiny, the return to Westeros. So here we are, the final chapter of this long, fiery Targaryen journey. After years of wandering across Essos, freeing cities, raising dragons, burning the occasional slaver, Daenerys Targaryen finally sets her eyes on the place she's been dreaming about since childhood, Westeros. The land her family once ruled. The home she never saw. The throne she believed was her destiny. And the moment she arrives, oh, it's cinematic. Waves crash. Storm clouds swirl. The dragons cry overhead. And Daenerys steps foot on Dragonstone, the same ancient fortress her family held for centuries. The same place where she was born during a storm. Now she returns as a conqueror with 3 dragons, a fleet, and enough determination to power a small nation. Walking through those halls was like stepping into a memory from her bloodline, old stone, old magic, old history. You can almost hear whispers from Aegon the Conqueror himself, "Nice castle, right?" And unlike Essos, this wasn't a strange land. This was home. Or at least, the closest thing she had to it. But landing in Westeros didn't mean instant success. Daenerys needed allies, and fast. That's where the political game began. She had Tyrion Lannister as her hand, the clever one with the good one-liners. She had Grey Worm, Missandei, the Unsullied, and the Dothraki. But she needed support from actual Westerosi houses. So she teamed up with the Tyrells, the Martells, and later on, made a deal with Theon and Yara Greyjoy. Basically, she was assembling the Westeros version of the Avengers. Of course, she also met the 2 biggest headaches in the 7 Kingdoms, Cersei Lannister and Euron Greyjoy. Between Cersei's cruelty and Euron's mustache-twirling madness, Daenerys found herself fighting a different kind of war, one where strategy mattered more than fire. But fire still helped. A lot. As the war heated up, Daenerys unleashed her dragons on enemy ships and armies. Watching Drogon burn a Lannister line was the kind of thing bards write epic songs about, and also the kind of thing that makes soldiers rethink all their life choices. And then something unexpected entered her story: Jon Snow. Jon arrived not for politics, but for survival. He needed dragonglass to fight the White Walkers. And Daenerys, well, she wasn't planning to hand anything out for free. Their first meeting was awkward, intense, and full of stubborn energy. He refused to bend the knee, she refused to help without loyalty. Classic slow burn tension. But when they faced the Night King's army together, everything changed. Daenerys lost Viserion to an ice spear, almost died saving Jon, and realized the threat in the north wasn't a story, it was real. After that, she didn't just want the throne. She wanted to save the world. And Jon, for the first time, saw Daenerys as more than a queen. He saw a partner. Romance bloomed. Feelings happened. Soft looks were exchanged. And then, plot twist. Jon learned something that shook everything. His real name was Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Which meant he wasn't a northern bastard, he was a Targaryen with a stronger claim to the Iron Throne than Daenerys herself. Awkward. That revelation hit Dany like a hammer. Destiny was her anchor, her guide, her whole life's purpose. And now suddenly she might not be the rightful heir. Worse, the man she cared about might be. It created tension between them, even though Jon swore he didn't want the throne. And all of this was happening while the final war approached. When the Northern Army marched south and the Night King fell, Daenerys went all in on taking King's Landing. She faced betrayal, losses, and fear that the people of Westeros would never love her. Every siege and setback pushed her a little further into isolation. One by one, her closest allies died or were taken from her. Missandei's last word, Dracarys, echoed in her mind like a spark waiting for fuel. Finally, the day came. Drogon in the sky. Armies at the walls. Cersei hiding in the Red Keep. The bells of surrender rang out over King's Landing, a sign the city had given up. But Daenerys didn't stop. This was the moment that defined her downfall. The moment where destiny twisted into something darker. She and Drogon burned the city, not just the soldiers, not just the walls, but whole streets, crowds, homes, everything. It was destruction on a scale that echoed the worst stories of old Valyria. To Daenerys, it was justice. To the world, it was horror. She believed fear would secure peace. She believed prophecy demanded sacrifice. She believed that if she didn't break the wheel harshly, it would rebuild itself. In her heart, she still saw herself as a liberator. But much like her father, her power became a shadow she could no longer see around. When the smoke cleared, Tyrion and Jon realized a terrible truth: if Daenerys took the throne now, she might rule the same way she had fought, with fire. And Jon, torn between love and duty, made the hardest choice of his life. In the throne room, under the ruins of the Red Keep, he held her, kissed her, and then ended her life. It was a soft moment wrapped in heartbreak, tragedy, and the weight of centuries. Drogon arrived, grieving in a way only a dragon can, crying fire, melting the Iron Throne into nothing but molten metal. No more throne. No more dynasty. No more prophecy. Just ashes and loss. And this is where Daenerys' story becomes something bigger than one life. Her rise showed the world the hope of a Targaryen reborn, someone brave, strong, and ready to fight for the powerless. Her fall showed the danger of believing destiny gives the right to rule without question. In the end, Daenerys Targaryen became both symbol and warning, the last chapter in a house shaped by glory, madness, prophecy, and fire. Her journey closed the book on House Targaryen's long saga. From Valyria to Westeros, from dragons to ashes, Daenerys was the final flame, bright, beautiful, and impossible to control. The legacy of House Targaryen, fire that never dies. So here we are, at the end of this long, fiery road. We've followed the Targaryens from their shiny Dragonlord glory days all the way to, well, madness, exile, prophecies, more madness, and a few explosions too bright for bedtime viewing. And now it's time to talk about what they actually left behind. Because for a family that kept losing crowns, dragons, children, and sometimes their grip on reality, the Targaryens still managed to leave a mark on Westeros deeper than any Valyrian steel blade. Let's start with the big question: what do the Targaryens represent in the world of Westeros? At their core, the Targaryens represent the limitless promise, and danger, of power that comes from somewhere almost magical. They're the living reminder that the world was once full of strange things: dragons who shadowed mountains, glass candles that burned without flame, bloodlines touched by old powers. When the Targaryens arrived from Valyria, they weren't just another noble house looking for land. They were a family carrying a piece of a lost world, a world that most people in Westeros didn't even believe could exist. And that shiny, almost mythical aura followed them throughout the entire history of their rule. Even when they messed up, which was often, people still whispered about their dragon blood, their dreams, their strange gifts. They were rulers, yes, but they were also symbols. Living proof that magic was not dead, only sleeping. And as long as a Targaryen sat on the Iron Throne, the realm felt a little bit closer to the stories of old. But of course, the Targaryens also represent something else: the cycle of fire, prophecy, ambition, and downfall. You know the vibe: someone reads a little prophecy at breakfast, decides destiny wants them to save the world, and next thing you know, half the continent is on fire. Classic Targaryen morning routine. From Aegon dreaming of a unified Westeros, to Daenerys believing she was born to break the wheel, the pattern repeats again and again: a Targaryen sees themselves as chosen. Special. Touched by fate. And to be fair, sometimes they kinda were. But the problem with destiny is that it doesn't come with instructions. Aerys thought he was chosen. Demon Blackfyre thought he was chosen. Rhaegar thought he was chosen. And they all set the world spinning in different directions, convinced the flame spoke to them alone. This repeated dance of ambition and ruin becomes the backbone of Targaryen history. Each generation climbs higher, reaches for something impossible, and then, whoops, falls right off the dragon's saddle. And Westeros, poor thing, always ends up cleaning the ashes. Now let's talk about their cultural impact, because honestly, it's massive. The Targaryens changed the Seven Kingdoms in ways that stayed long after their last dragon fell. First, they unified the realm. Sure, they did it with fire and fear, but hey, it worked. Before Aegon, Westeros was a patchwork quilt of kingdoms constantly fighting, stealing each other's sheep, and arguing over who insulted whose grandmother first. After Aegon, the land became one political body. Almost peaceful. Mostly peaceful. Okay, sometimes peaceful. But still, this was a big deal. Second, they reintroduced magic, not the pull a rabbit out of a hat kind, but the real, ancient stuff. Even when dragons disappeared, their bones remained, their story survived, and their legacy kept the idea of magic alive in people's hearts. And when Daenerys hatched her dragons, that spark roared back to life stronger than ever. Fire literally brought magic back into the world, and of course it had to be Targaryen fire. Third, they changed the culture, fashion, and flair of the kingdom. Silver gold hair. Instant symbol of royalty. Dragons? Put them on every banner. Valyrian words? Suddenly cool again. Even their tragedies shaped Westeros: stories of Summerhall, the Dance of the Dragons, the Blackfyre rebellions. Every time the Targaryens fell apart, the realm changed with them, like a piece of pottery getting cracked and glued back differently each time. But maybe the deepest legacy they leave behind is the memory of what power can do. Their story is a warning, but also a dream. It's the tale of a family that flew higher than anyone else ever dared, and paid for it. Sometimes with blood, sometimes with sanity, sometimes with everything. And that message echoes long after their dynasty ends. When you look at the kings that followed, or even the common folk telling tales in a tavern, the idea of the Targaryens becomes bigger than the family themselves. They become legend, the dynasty that tamed dragons, ruled a continent, burned cities, lost everything, and still refused to fade away. Because even when they were gone, some part of them stayed alive in whispers and hopes and the ashes of old prophecies. And that's why the Targaryens feel eternal. Even when their thrones crumble, their dragons die, or their last heirs scatter across the world, there's always this quiet little spark that refuses to die out. Like a campfire that looks cold, but if you poke it just right, suddenly a new flame appears. And really, that's the heart of their story: fire never dies, it only waits. So as we end this last chapter, let's slow down and breathe for a moment. The whole Targaryen saga is huge: centuries of rise, fall, battles, dreams, tears, dragons, and very questionable life choices. And now, with the story told, the fire settles. Picture this: a quiet night in Westeros. The sky is dark, the wind soft, and the only sound is the distant crash of waves against Dragonstone's cliffs. In the hearth, a small flame flickers. Not roaring, not wild. Just glowing, gentle, patient. That flame is the Targaryen legacy. Sometimes bright, sometimes dim, sometimes almost gone. But always there. And that's the magic of dynasties. They rise with fire, fall into shadow, rise again, fall again, and yet something remains. A lesson. A memory. A story waiting to be told to someone drifting off to sleep. So let the dragons rest now. Let the Iron Throne cool. Let the songs finish their last notes. Because even when the fires fade, the echoes stay, warm, soft, and eternal. And with that, we close the book on House Targaryen, a house of dreamers, conquerors, fools, heroes, and fire that never truly dies. Sleep well, and may your dreams take flight, maybe not on dragons, though. Those things are a lot to handle.